There we go. All right. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming on. This is Bound by the Scene, and this is actually a bit of a different segment that we're going to be doing because I do not have Spirit Binder with me. I do have somebody else, somebody different, and this kind of little bit of a difference is called Beyond Your Scene. This is where we interview somebody from a different kink sphere of life and see exactly what brought them in. And my guest today is RopeBaby. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. How are you?
I'm alive and kicking. Work has been doing a number on me. Two different promotions in about 3 weeks. Yeah, significant changes in my lifestyle. So I've noticed you've been busy. We've been trying to get this down hat a little bit, and it seems like scheduling has been tough.
Yeah, I mean, I work from home, like with my OnlyFans and porn work and stuff. So I'm always busy.
I would imagine. I hope business is good for you. I really hope so.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
So again,
people are very horny in quarantine.
I've noticed that. Even as somebody that is like probably like asexual due to the fact that I have a medical condition doesn't allow me to like enjoy sex the way most people do. The itch is there. Like, it's weird. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we should get started. So what brought you into kink? Is there a specific genre of literature that caught your attention? Like A Story of O, Marquis de Sade, 50 Shades of Grey, anything new?
Actually, let's see. So I've never seen or read 50 Shades. I'm not sure what The Story of O is, but yeah, I actually, it was kind of a little bit accidental. I had always had like kinky proclivities or whatever, but I'd been kind of, not ashamed of them per se, but I hadn't had the chance to really explore them because when you're looking at representations of BDSM, this was, and I got into kink about 6 years ago, so this was like before 50 Shades really popularized BDSM. But before that, it's kind of represented, like the way that it is represented in porn is kind of scary, like for somebody who doesn't know anything about it. And so I hadn't really had any education at all about kink, and just been having, or had like, CNC fantasies or bondage fantasies, but had always felt like, oh no, they're bad or something. But I actually got introduced to it randomly. I was horny trolling Reddit, and there was a subreddit there called Cum Tributes, and I was getting real active on that. And so I had someone message me, and we just sort of like started this online dom sub relationship, which was super new to me. I didn't really know like what a dom was or anything. And so with that introduction, like I started doing my own research and Googling things, and discovered this whole world of information, like, labels and terminology and vocabulary for things that I didn't know were okay. And then I got so into it that I pretty much convinced like all my friends, like we're all kinky, all of us. And like, and a friend of mine actually had been going to dungeons already. And so she took us out to a TNG. I was living in DC at the time, and there were these get-togethers, the next generation for like 18 to 35-year-olds. And she took us there, and we were all kind of new to it, and that's where it started.
Well, that's significantly different than how I got into it. Mine was a little bit more of a little random accident. I was way too young for any terms of services to be mentioning, and I accidentally stubbed my toe on a PVC pipe that was in the ground, and I was like, what are these feelings? I'm confused. And then it just spiraled.
Really organic.
Very, very organic. And I was like, what are these feelings? Oh, God. And then later on, the vocabulary came and I was like, oh, well, that's odd. Mm-hmm. And then our high school did a play by the Marquis de Sade, who, if our listeners don't know who that is, it's basically where we get the term sadism from. And I taught a bunch of actors how to use a whip because I grew up on a farm. And there you have it. That's how Tentacle Bound became kinky. And it was just this weird set of emotions that came into play. And now that now that you mentioned that you actually went into a TNG and all that, how would you say that you've been public about your kink? Are there any reasons behind that you've been a little bit more public than most people? Because I'm semi-private, but I'm also like outed to my bosses at work, so that way I'm not liable to get fired.
So at the time, I didn't really have a career path that where it was necessary for me to be anonymous, and I didn't anticipate that I would either. I think that kind of is a defining factor for a lot of people in their anonymity. So for me, I was just working like a regular retail job, and like I have tattoos. It's just in my personality where I am not a person that is particularly concerned with how other people perceive me necessarily. That can be good or bad, but it's just the way that it was at the time. And it was actually through a scene that I was doing. I was super new, but there was a person there who was really good at doing rope. And this was right in the beginning of my rope experience. And we did a scene at the TNG, and I was really caught up in it, didn't really notice. I was naked, there was impact play and rope stuff happening and sexy things. And when the scene ended, I realized that there was like 100 people watching us. And before that situation, I really considered myself to be pretty like private and shy. Like, like if a gust of wind was blowing, like I'd be really nervous that like my dress would like fly up or something. But after that situation where I realized so many people were watching me, I was like, wow, okay, I kind of like this feeling. So I guess it really kind of opened my eyes to the exhibitionist side of myself. So yeah, I hadn't really had a problem with being public about it. And I started my FetLife profile, as we all do.
Yep, I still have mine.
Yeah, and then I migrated to Tumblr, and then it just went from there.
Well, that's a good way to put that. Like I think with my life, I ended up staying significantly more private than I thought I would ever be. And then around the 6-year mark, I was like, you know what? I got out of a really, really estranged partnership that I was in, and then I was still kind of trying to attempt to be kinky because I was like, well, I was kinky with them. It didn't really work out. Let me try going out to an event. And I went out to an event unironically 6 years ago. And then I just kind of stumbled and fell into a rigging career and a photography career. I was like, oh no, what did I do? Oh boy. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, the photos is really, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Being involved with the photography behind it. Because then you have documented proof, and then you're like, well,
shit, I don't know what to do. Yeah. And as I'm looking at my camera right now, like, you've seen some things, my friend, and we have some stories to tell. Yeah. Oh boy. Since you've been part of the scene as a whole, do you still affiliate with your local community at all, or by any chance, if not, what's going on with that?
So let's see. So I started my rope journey and my BDSM journey in the DMV area, and I spent a few years there. At the time, I think it was like 2014, 2015. And when I was there in the beginning, I was fairly active in that community because at that time, especially, there were so many talented, and there still are these same people there. They're just not as enmeshed in the community as they were back then. There was a vibrant rope community there. And so I was going to as many events as I could. both performances and educational, like they would sometimes have people come in and talk about just important educational stuff. So I was really involved in the community there then as a beginner. And I think that that's really important, really crucial for a beginner to be involved in a local community, because, it holds people accountable for newbies coming in. It's a whole new world, and it's really helpful to have people that can kind of guide you on how to navigate your self-exploration safely and hold people accountable who might be predatorial in that situation. So, I was very involved back then. And then I've been traveling a lot for the past several years. I've been traveling, and in the past year, 2019, I spent most of that traveling and teaching all across the US and in Europe. And of course, we're brought in by communities. So I was able to kind of like get a taste and a feel for various kink and rope communities around the US and in Europe. And I just landed here in Arizona at the beginning of this year, right before the pandemic. So I haven't really had a chance to explore this local community. I will say, though, that my feelings about community, like I do believe that a community is absolutely essential. But I kind of, my focus has kind of shifted to two kinds of communities. One, the online community, which is vibrant, super important. I consider the online community in kink to be a really great place to keep up to date with consent practice and accountability process and just like the ideology of what's socially acceptable. I think that because there's so many different conversations happening, that, following educators and leaders in communities and venues are just a really important way to kind of like stay current. And then, yeah,
that's a very good way of putting it. And I'm sorry for interrupting him. That was a very good point, and I wanted to touch on that one.
Sure, yeah.
Because as far as my local community, it's primarily out of Texas. Well, since everybody already knows, as far as my thing is concerned, is out of San Antonio. And the shift of losing like community centers and some popping up has kind of shifted the feeling about communities. Like, it is important, especially for newbies. I remember if I didn't have any of the information that I was given when I was brought in, I would not be where I'm at. I wouldn't be able to even think of teaching somebody how to do rope, let alone performing in a public setting. That's a no-go. But at the same time, you have people that are kind of shady, kind of snaky, and that's no bueno. Again, I'm sorry for interrupting you. That was actually a really good segue for that one.
Yeah, sure.
Another thing. So how do you view kink as a way for sexual expression? Are sex and kink intertwined for you? Because there's a weird question weird comment that most people give to me, or at least they gave to me when the local community was here, is that sex and kink should never be mixed.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. I think that, for one thing, it's definitely highly subjective and highly situational, because for me, like when you say kink, for me, that does encompass the psychosexual aspects as well. Like that encompasses power dynamics and fantasies, role play, and stuff like that. So yes, for me personally, kink is actually an essential aspect of my sexuality. Like, even if there isn't any conversation about any kind of BDSM, or if there's no overt BDSM activity going on, there's at least something in my head. Like, there's some kind, whether there's an age gap or a power dynamic that I perceive, or maybe I'm just having a little fantasy in my head. I mean, I don't often have just straight up vanilla sex, I guess, or sex with people who are not involved in kink. So it's not very common for me to have that kind of situation happen. But that said, like, while kink is an essential part of my sexuality, and what I consider to be like the psychology of my arousal is rooted in BDSM elements. While that's true, it's also true for me that there are some BDSM activities that are not sexual. They are erotic. They are, erotic and stimulating, but not like penetrative sex or, penetrative sex specifically, not necessarily a part of it. Stuff like rope bondage, for example, it's not, I've been doing rope for about 6 years now, and I've only really had sex in rope a handful of times. It's just not the focus in some activities for me.
And sometimes the logistics of that is very difficult. And it's like, how do you want me to do 7 transitions and have sex with you? That doesn't sound possible. I can tie a Sibian. That'll do the job. That'll probably be fun. Right. Very messy, but no. And it brings up some of the weirdest question, because I don't know if it's a generational thing or it's just based on, I guess, old guard would be the way it is. But there's a vast amount of people that I've seen where it's just, no, you don't do that. It's a non-thing. And I wonder if it's a way for people to kind of like adjust it to their own sensibilities. Like if you tell somebody, no, you're not going to do kink with sex here, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to do it ever. And I wonder if that's actually a part of that conversation. It's been a minute since I've talked to somebody in a community as a whole, because after I moved from the States to Japan, then back, the weird cultural shift from being in Japan and being back over here was like, I don't know if I want to be part of this community anymore. There's a lot of weird things going on that I don't like.
Yeah. I find it really common, especially in the kink community, for people to be very, very opinionated about what things are or are not or should or shouldn't be. I think that a part of that is pretty natural. Like it becomes a part of our identity. And so we develop strong opinions about it for ourselves personally. And I think there are some opinions that we should all hold dear, about consent, for example. But in terms of what something should or shouldn't be, like whether something should be sexual or not sexual, that's kind of the whole reason why we became kinky, right? Is because we don't want to be beholden to these strict concepts about what sex can be. And also, I think it's good to point out that sex doesn't have to be penetrative. Like they're all kind of erotic and sensual experiences that we can have.
Tantra is a good example. Tantra is a very good example of that. Yeah. A sensual massage. Or just throwing each other in a cuddle pile. That right there, that's good stuff. I like that. That was a really good conversation. I haven't had somebody because my co-host Spirit, me and him have relatively similar mindsets as far as that. We're both kind of just like, well, we don't really need sexual intercourse, and most of the things become mechanical for us because we want to make sure that we don't violate consent. There's a level of like, okay, well, there's only these things that we're going to do, nothing more, nothing less. You can always talk down in it during the scene, but not negotiate up, anything of the sort. And it becomes a bit more theatrical, I guess, in my head for myself. And the sexual element tends to, since it's not already there, it just tends to stay way, way back there, which is a bit weird. And having somebody that has a little bit more, I guess, involvement, and especially since you are is it correct to call you a sex worker? Yeah, I am. A sex worker, it's just an interesting conversation to be had, and I do appreciate it. So here's a fun question, as I'm sure most of the female audience that we do have. How do you manage what I'm assuming is a flood of guys trying to hook up with you or even for play? And also, has anyone ever tried to pretend to be more skilled than what they lead on to be, as far as a scene, photo shoot, or even attempt to do your videos for you?
Yeah, so it's I can't speak for other sex workers or other kinksters in general, but honestly, people don't really try to hook up with me. I don't know I don't really know why. I don't know why. Maybe people think there's just like no chance or something. I'm not really sure. But yeah, so trying to hook up with me, not really a thing, but definitely people pretending to be more skilled. That's been an issue that I've come across. I've seen people, be called out for that in scenes, and it's definitely predatory behavior. And I think that it's a lot more common on certain platforms, like on FetLife, for example. People are way more aggressive about trying to find a play partner. I don't even check my messages on there anymore because there's just a bunch of people that I don't know who are saying sexual things to me and like want to play. And I'm like, this is not how I do things. And yeah, I mean, so like I said, I mean, I've been doing BDSM for about 6 years, and it's a relatively small community of people who are at the skill level that I would trust to do the kind of play that I want to do. And so I don't know, I kind of think that like if there was somebody that I would want to play with, I probably would have heard of them before they contacted me. But I'm also very wary of anybody who claims to be particularly good at something. It's like your work should speak for itself, Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think people who are beginners are the most at risk for that kind of behavior, because predators, they don't go after people who are experienced. They go after people who are not and who don't know necessarily what to look out for. And I always vet people all the time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the better things that I've learned as far as whether it's tying, whether it's anything of the sort. Like if I just ask, hey, here is a list of things I would like to do as far as a shoot's concerned. Even having that just said, from my experience, shuts people's brains off, especially in the because we were in a hookup culture not too long ago, and I think that kind of still is a part of what leaked into kink a little bit, and the whole getting dick pics and everything like that, to the point where it's now illegal in Texas. You get fined for that if you unsolicitedly send somebody a dick pic. Oh yeah, no, it's great. I like that. Means I won't get any dick pics because some of my profile photos are of people I tie. And some of them are female identifying, and it's just like, I'm not so female. Like, is this what y'all go through? Oh God, no.
Yeah. No, you're right. There definitely was a period of time, and especially, in Rope especially, I remember there was a period of time, and I did this too, where I just wanted Rope for photos. I went through a phase where I was just like, I want to be tied up and I want cute photos. And like, that's why I'm doing Rope. And I fully admit that it's not the case for me now, but it was when I was just getting started. And that definitely is kind of dangerous. Like if that's, if your goal is for the photos, there are definitely people who will try to take advantage of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple of instances, and I won't bring them up to light right now. That's probably what I'm going to save for another actual in-depth conversation with my co-host, because my God, is it bad. So many names, and I'm probably going to get DMC strikes for using any of them. So we're going to continue on with the conversation. So if you don't mind me asking, what brought you to selling your content?
So at the beginning of my BDSM journey, I was really trying to promote bottoming education. I felt that there wasn't really enough representation from the bottom's perspective. And I wanted to hear about I wanted to learn and to hear more about how to be a good bottom when I was coming up in the scene. And so I wanted to kind of compile resources and experiences and stuff. And so I started this very short-lived blog on Tumblr called Gimme Ice Cream. And it was intended to be kind of like a zine where I would interview people and, write things and have guest writers and stuff like that. And it lasted for, I don't know, a month or something like that. And I found that people were way more interested in my personal experiences and me sharing my experiences with the daddy girl relationship that I was in, and me sharing, you know, photos and my experiences with impact play and rope and stuff like that. So then I decided to just, like abandon the zine situation and just go with representing my own journey in kink. And so then I started to get a bit of a following on Tumblr, and then I started to do YouTube tutorials on rope. And I mean, I had before my YouTube got deleted, I had 100,000 subscribers, and it became something that I realized I could profit from, not necessarily, you know, rope in particular, but just in general. I was not expecting it, but people were pretty interested in me. And so I started a Snapchat, and then from Snapchat it was ManyVids, and here we are.
And it seems like you've done quite a bit to get to where you are now, and I got to congratulate you. That is a level of gumption that I'm trying to aspire to for just doing free content. It's man, that's dedication. How?
You know what? It's really just a drive to I'm not very good at working in environments where there's a boss. I'm just it's a struggle for me. So I find it easier to grind for myself, and that's just been my motivation full time.
Kudos to you. I got to give it to you. That's a level of self-determination that I aspire to have one day. I make it sound like I'm such a lazy piece of shit, but in reality, I'm working over 60 hours now, and it's just oh my God, what did I do to deserve this?
Yeah, I mean, you sound pretty busy.
Yeah, especially when we got several contracts for 4 or 5 different jobs that they have to be done before the end of the year, and each of those jobs will probably take about 2 to 3 weeks to do in its entirety. So that's a whole level of fun, but it does pay for all of my wonderful equipment, so I'm okay. So when you started your business, did it come with any hurdles that you had to overcome as far as I guess marketing or anything of the sort, or did some of that transition from your YouTube, your Tumblr, and all that?
Well, I was pretty fortunate because when I started, kink online and sex work online was not really camming was a thing for sure, but what we have now was not the case 5 years ago. So there wasn't really now it's so saturated. I mean, I can't imagine trying to break into doing something like OnlyFans now, because there's so many people doing it. And it's really hard to get a following in a situation like that. But yeah, because when I started, there wasn't really anyone doing the style of stuff that I was doing. I mean, I was kind of my aesthetic was very cute BDSM, and that was not very common at the time, because at the time, and this is why I was doing it at the time, BDSM was black and red, you know, and just very serious.
I remember all of those photos. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah. And so I was just no, I want this to be cute. It can still be hardcore. It can still be, you know, scary and intimidating, but it can also be pink and cute and fluffy and whatever. So I didn't really have there wasn't a lot of competition back then. So really it just that part wasn't hard. But I will say that throughout the many years of me doing it, I think the biggest hurdle has always been having a relationship alongside doing this work.
If you don't mind, would you elaborate?
Yeah. So I've dated people both in and out of the industry, people who are in and not involved in kink, and there are unique challenges with any kind of situation. I mean, obviously there are people who make it work, and that's amazing and awesome and beautiful. And, but yeah, I mean, cause a relationship takes communication and trust and all those things. And it really puts it to the test when you're working in a situation where you are making money and profiting off of your sexuality and displays of your sexuality and performance of your sexuality. I think that, in some cases, there would be people who think that RopeBaby is my entire persona. Like I'm not actually like there's no other dimension to me other than what you see online. There are definitely people like that. There are also cases where, people they think that they're comfortable with it, and then we get into a fight, and then it's like, well, why are you showing your butthole? So it can definitely be
because
kind of complicated.
Because it was cute, the lighting was right, and it just looked great.
Right.
I think I can relate to that, because there's been times where like I've gone back to dating vanilla people, and I won't say it's just strictly to vanilla people, but I guess I'd call myself monogamish on a good day. Depends on the partner that I'm with, and the fact that at a certain point in my life I was a performer for the local community, tying everybody and everybody basically like a revolving door. And I think that left that person kind of like, well, why do you do that? Well, because it's fun. Like this is my kink. Well, can't you do that with me? It was like, I can and I do, but this is also part of my life. Like, you kind of knew that going in. Is there anything we can like adjust about? And it usually doesn't work out. It usually doesn't. And I would
on that, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just it reminded me of something. But on that, I found that some of the harder aspects of dating someone in the industry is that kind of like they're doing what you want to. They're doing the things that you love with a lot of people, and they're, for me at least, and I don't, whatever. Like, I admit if this is not cool for me to feel this way, whatever, this is just how I feel. But I always want something special, like something special just for us, So I think that that's really important in a relationship with somebody who's like doing performance or being kinky or whatever.
Yeah,
with
like,
a lot of people.
Yeah, like almost like a specific tie that you will not do on anybody else or anything of that sort, or just
something special. Or
a nice candlelight dinner while the other person's eating it, while the other person's in rope trying to eat it. Like that's get creative. And
yeah.
I'm sure you've also seen that photo. There's a very specific one that I remember. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure. Good old memories. What views do you feel kinksters should honestly uphold? Because there's a lot of very nuanced ones. There's a lot of very strict ones that we all go through, like consent. Consent is that's a hard one. You either do it or you're not in it. And that's kind of the biggest thing that we've stuck with. But is there anything else that you can think of?
Me to say that anyone should necessarily have any specific views, but I do think that having a particular mindset is really important, and that mindset is of growth and openness. I think that people who want to consider themselves or present themselves as being a safe, in quotes, safe player or someone to be trusted, I think that we really need to have an open mind and critical thinking skills and be able to self-evaluate and to be able to take criticism from other people, whether that criticism is directed at them directly or maybe at a friend of theirs or an idea that they hold or something. I think that it's hard because there are all these nuances, and kink becomes a part of our identity. And if somebody calls you out for something, or if a scene doesn't go the way that, you thought it was going, it can be hard to take that criticism. And I think that not being able to really be open to hearing ideas that you're not familiar with, I think that, I think people should be open and always learning and growing and accepting failures, holding yourselves accountable. yeah, I mean, consent is super important, but so is continuing the education on consent, because it starts as explicit. I mean, that's what we all recognize as being consent, is like, yes, this is okay, and no, this is not okay. But then, you know, the more that we understand about each other in kink, and this is like ever evolving, we see it in the community, like all over, these issues with boundaries and emotional boundaries. It's like the psychological part is the part that's the hardest. And I think that we have to continue to like educate ourselves. So having like the values I think people should have are like this value, the values of being open-minded and constantly learning.
I think those are very good things to keep in mind and to uphold, because over time we get complacent. And I've even seen this with some of my scenes with people that I've played with for longer than a couple of months. I get sometimes a year. Like there's a couple of times where like I'm going to revisit the concept of like consent with my partner, because it's like, you gave me these very vague ways to kind of do these things. Can we be a little bit more specific so I don't cross any boundaries? Is there any underlying things that I should know or I should think of or be aware when this is happening? And sometimes it can get messy, sometimes it can be perfect, and I think that's great. I think that's something to really think about. All right, now this is the fun part. What are your thoughts on SSC, rack, and prick for being a norm? Because there's been a couple of I think there's another what is the word for it?
Acronym?
Thank you, acronym. And I can't remember it for the life of me, but I think there's another one. But SSC, rack, and prick are the ones we're going to discuss. How do you feel as the norm, especially with the concept of like consent ever evolving and changing?
So I think they're all essentially saying the same thing. And I think, at least for me, prick is a newer one. I remember SSC being a thing when I was first learning about BDSM, and it's just way too general. And I think it's just like SSC, and then it gets a little bit more specific with rack, and then even more specific with prick. But it's all kind of the same concept. And you know, with rack, risk aware, consensual, and with prick, personal responsibility informed, it's kind of the same thing to me. I think that it's easy to throw around an acronym, but to really like understand what it means, it takes real reflection, like self-reflection, to understand what risks there are for you as an individual. Takes real introspection, because it's like, it's not just if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. So think about that. No, it's also about how, you know, we all carry around some trauma or some emotional processing that we haven't done yet. And, you know, maybe there's going to be a scene where you start to process some emotions, or a past trauma gets triggered. Those are also risks. Those are personal risks that you have to be considerate of. And it's also important to communicate those risks with your partner as well. I think that the acronyms themselves are too easy to just throw around and say, I practice risk-aware consensual kink or whatever. But the reality is, it's people are going to mess up. They're going to run into problems that they didn't necessarily anticipate. Those are the risks to be aware of. And the thing to consider the most is, what are you going to do if that happens? So I think it's really important for people to be aware of those things, but not just like rely on an acronym, or to say that I practice risk-aware consensual kink. It's more than just saying it. Like, it takes a lot of introspection. So
That it does. And I think some of the weird things with rack and prick being thrown around is like, well, rack means risk awareness. That means the things that I am doing specifically are going to be dangerous. So you have to, it's like, no, that's not really how that works. A simple paddling scene can take somebody into a headspace they were not intending on going into. You could you could put them in a little space. You could put them in a fight or flight space where they just need to get away from you, and it can cause some trauma. And I think that's, and I think I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. A lot of that's lost without thinking about, okay, well, how are you going to deal with the thing that's happening, as opposed to how is the other person you're playing going to be processing everything. It's a good way of putting it. Solid information. So next one is there anything you would have liked to know before you got more involved in kink?
You know, I don't think that there's anything, because, so I guess maybe I'm lucky and fortunate in that I haven't had any real negative experiences in a scene. Like I haven't had a situation where there's been a consent violation or anything like that. So for me personally, it's just been a journey that I'm grateful for, all the experiences that I've had that have helped kind of shape how I think and feel about certain kinks. And without those experiences, I just wouldn't have as much of an understanding as I do now. Like there's only so much that people can tell you. And in fact, I think I probably was told, you know, for example, one of the learning lessons that I had where I learned something the hard way was when I was at a rope event, and this was in like the DMV area in like 2015 or something. And one of the leaders of the community, very well-known and well-respected rigger, was tying me for the first time. And I was like, oh my God, I was like ecstatic because, you know, I felt special that like he was cool with tying me. And I was like, all right, cool. And I get into a TK and it's only partially loaded. My feet aren't off the floor or anything. And I can't feel my fingertips. And he asks me eventually if I can like make a motorcycle motion, and I couldn't. I was trying to, but I couldn't. And my thought process was like, oh, don't make a big deal about it. Just say it's okay, because, you know, you don't want this whole scene to be ruined, and then he'll never want to tie you again. Like those are the thoughts that were like going on in my mind, which are totally like, they're understandable. They're common for newbies, but I mean, knowing what I know now, like it was a situation where what ended up happening was, because I couldn't do it, you know, he brought me down. I had a very temporary wrist drop, like just a compression situation where I couldn't literally move my wrists at all. And I drove there. So there we go with the risk-aware consensual kink part. Like, you know, I drove, and yet I put myself in a situation where, you know, I was too concerned about the way things looked than what was happening in my body. And long story short, it ended up being okay. I was fine. Like 15 minutes later, he was really nice about it and followed up with me a few days later. But, you know, I had been told about nerve injuries. Like I knew that they existed. So I think some things, you know, for me at least, I'm grateful for those experiences, because luckily nothing long-term happened to me. But I was able to like really understand the importance. Like that was a big lesson for me. I was like, all right, these are real risks that I'm taking here. And I gotta be more careful next time.
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to answer that question, is understand that even rope tops can get nerve damage done. I didn't realize that I was doing really stupidly strenuous things, and I ended up with tendonitis on my right hand. So two of my fingers are completely useless. Don't have any grip strength anymore. It's great.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So I guess maybe I would change the answer and just say like more. I probably would have benefited from more education on the anatomy of rope. rope on the body, which is something that's still rare in rope education. So
I think
hopefully that'll change.
I hope so, because I think there's only one educator right now that's doing anything about it, and we're all in quarantine, so we can't take her class.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
I miss anatomy and physiology. That was one of my favorite classes in college and high school. I'm gonna go cry now. Let's see here. So when looking back on your kink career, what classes did you teach before pre-quarantine?
So let's see. This was mostly in conjunction with my partner at the time, and this was rope bondage. They were all rope bondage. We did a lot of fundamentals classes with there were a few advanced rigging classes, but for the most part, it was fundamentals. And honestly, fundamentals, like in rope, fundamentals is just something that no matter how advanced you are, it's always good to revisit those. It's something that I think, at least in the beginning, people kind of breeze over when they're doing rope bondage because you want to get to the good bit. You want to get to the part where you get to suspend someone. And so you kind of, you find a single column tie that works, and then you just use that. And so revisiting fundamentals in a way where you're able to kind of explore the basics in a structured way. So we taught a lot of that. And what I was contributing was mostly bottoming education in terms of, what to expect during the ties, preparing yourself for it and processing through it. So, and the safety and concerns and stuff like that, it's something that it was definitely very subjective and based on whatever ties we were teaching. But yeah.
Yeah, those all very solid things. I don't remember the last time I ever went to like a rope convention or a rope intensive that the fundamentals weren't re-beaten into my head, because again, complacency is a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah. And and with rope bondage specifically, like the fundamentals they're ever present. It's not like you do a suspension and the suspension is a bunch of, very necessarily intricate things. They're the same fundamental principles. They're just kind of all together now.
Yep, it's over and over and over again. You will always start a tie with a single column tie.
Exactly.
You will always go over and use an X friction. You'll always go over and use, maybe you use a T friction. Maybe. If you're feeling kind of, rambunctious for the evening, kind of want to spice things up a little bit. But no, and I think that was one of the jokes that me and my co-host had made when we were discussing a concept that was floating around a lot of the kinkosphere as far as FetLife's concerned about council of elders. Like, we can't get a rigger or a group of riggers to do the same single column tie over and over again. What makes you think we can all agree on who should dictate what we enjoy as far as kink is concerned?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you should have that group of elders all tell you what their go-to single column tie is, because I'm sure they will all be different.
Oh God, it was a mess. It was an entire shit show, to where even like other communities were getting involved with that comment. It's like, are you serious? Do you hear what you're saying? Like, why? That makes no sense. I don't need anybody dictating how I do my kink. Now, if I'm acting like a shitty person, throw me out. Yes. But not dictate, like not a whole bunch of other people saying that you and I can't do rope because they know better. It's like, what? Huh?
Yeah, right.
Makes no sense. Don't even know why. And last but not least, were there any troubles that you had to deal with in your kink / day-to-day life because you were more open than most about your kink / profession?
I can't recall there being any situation like that. But I think it's because I've made it like a point to surround myself with people that accept me and support me. There are people, like I don't talk about this stuff with like the older people in my family because it's like not really their business. Like I wouldn't talk about my sexuality with like how I have sex or what I like to do in sex with them. So I feel like it's not really relevant for me to talk about my kink life with my older family members or my sex work with them. But yeah, I mean, I really, especially now, I feel that it's so much more common. So at least with peers, it's not really an issue. It might be if you're younger and, there's older generations that you're interacting with. But for me, I haven't really run into any issues. I try to be very careful about who I tell about my profession, though. Like I'm not necessarily explicitly open with any stranger that I meet in real life, at least. Just because you never know. You never know what somebody might say or do. And sex work is something that unfortunately sometimes invites violence, whether that's emotional or otherwise. And so I'm just careful about that in real life. But otherwise, no, I guess I've been pretty lucky.
Well, that makes me happy. I'm glad. I sometimes that's one of the more tough questions to get through, especially with some people having severe trauma, any PTSD that has happened, some major consent violations, and it's a serious thing that sometimes we face. And you, as a sex worker, are kind of in the front line of it, which is not a good thing. As far as I'm concerned, none of y'all should get hurt for doing what capitalism wonderfully allows you to do. And I love that. By all means, make your money. Is it good content? Cool. Maybe I'll buy something. It sounds great. Sounds perfect.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's definitely something that I'm very happy and feel very fortunate to be able to do.
Awesome. Well, at the moment, those are all the questions I have for you. If you would like, I would like for you to plug your pluggables, anything where they can kind of interact with you, reach you, whether it be on Twitter or Instagram or anything of the sort. By all means, do your thing. I am more than happy to go ahead and show you support that way as well.
Cool. Okay, so Instagram, I am RopeBaby with an extra Y at the end because I've been deleted several times. And on my Instagram page, there is my campsite bio, which has all my links. And there you can find my Discord, which is really fun. I love being able to communicate with all my fans on there. My Discord, my OnlyFans, ManyVids. I do have a YouTube channel, but I haven't really uploaded too much there yet. But yeah, that's about it.
Well, again, I do appreciate you jumping online with me and taking this interview. And for everybody out there,
thanks.
Thank you for listening. You'll find this video on Pornhub as well as on YouTube at Bound by the Scene. And as always, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, Jeanne. We'll catch you next time. Peace.